Late Night Comfort, written by Aramau, and based off of stories and characters from the Brony D&D series. The Directian palace was quiet. Just when victory was in sight, the queen was taken from them by a vicious force, and the inhabitants, friends and dignitaries alike, were in a state of shocked mourning. The heroes of Directian, though successful in stemming the madness that Simula had unleashed, huddled morosely in their respective guest rooms given to them by the ministers of the Directian government. By tacit agreement, all parties had decided not to discuss the future of the kingdom that night and retired to their beds. Faithurin and Jalaram had retired to a tower room that Jalaram had requested for security purposes, purportedly. Rose had chosen to sleep outdoors in the gardens, hopefully in an area that hadn't been stained with blood. Amber and Ivan had collected a fretting Rayan and took him to their room near Jaminya's, and Owen had no doubt that the three of them were curled up in a ball on the gigantic bed, seeking comfort from each other. The generals of the other armies had taken up residence wherever they could in the remaining rooms. Owen had requested only a room with a balcony, and his request was granted with one of the biggest balconies in the palace. The room also happened to have been young Princess Jaminya's room at some point, if the hand-drawn pictures bearing the initials J.M. were any indication. The bed was smaller than normal and exceptionally comfortable, which Owen was having little trouble with, so he was sitting on the balcony observing the charred and beaten remains of the city and its walls. The battle with the demons had been exceptionally costly. Not only had Simula sacrificed a good portion of her population in the initial ritual, but the newly freed demons had slaughtered many of the rest. Now, the city felt empty and lifeless, as efforts to rebuild had been postponed until a course of action could be decided. The dwarf sighed through his nose. "Quite the mess you made, Simula." He turned his head ever so slightly and clenched his fist when he heard the doorknob turn. But he unclenched and turned back to the dismal view when he saw that Amber had come to visit. Owen was mildly surprised that she didn't come directly to him, so he turned his whole body around to see what she was doing. Amber stared forlornly at the pictures, crafts, and trinkets on the walls of Jaminya's old room. She reached out to touch an especially precious picture of a small, shaggy white puppy that had the name Moppy under it, and signed with Jaminya's initials. She swallowed roughly, took her hand away from the drawing, and turned to face Owen. She was a little surprised to see that he had actually turned his full attention to her, normally preferring to speak or observe indirectly. But she gratefully accepted it as she walked over to join him at the balcony. The two eldest of the heroes of Jaminya stood in silence for a good while, gazing out on the dilapidated city. Amber was comforted to see that there were still some lights on in some of the houses. Some of the Directians had managed to survive. Owen, however, was counting the houses that held no such hope. He was not pleased with the number he was at. To distract himself, he finally addressed the dragon. "What has you up so late? The child keeping you from sleeping?" he asked, and Amber shook her head. "Rain and Ivan fell asleep a while ago. I just couldn't. It felt like everything we worked for got taken away all at once," she admitted, leaning her head on her hands. Owen made no acknowledgement that he heard her, but she continued anyways. "I know that it didn't. We took out Simula and all the demons, and we saved as many people as we probably could, but I feel like without Jaminia, it doesn't mean much." Owen said nothing once more, but he understood what she meant. Jaminia had been pivotal to both the party's morale and the union of the nations of Alatastica for a good deal of the time they had been together. She had treated a band of misfits as though none of them were any different from the average person. She had taken in the lost and broken, perhaps out of being lost and broken herself, but also perhaps not. And in doing so, she had fostered a great amount of loyalty in the hearts of those she saved, including himself, loath to admit it as he was. Amber interrupted his thoughts. "What are we going to do, Owen?" He deigned to turn his head toward her to see her big green eyes beginning to water and her lower lip to tremble ever so slightly. Owen looked back toward the city and sighed. "I assume there will be a call among the group to go rescue her, and I do not see very many people having a problem with the proposition, though they may balk at the execution. Going down into hell would certainly not be on many people's to-do lists." Amber laughed at his mild attempt at humor, then sighed herself. "I'll go." "There was never a doubt in my mind." "Huh. Will you?" Owen paused again, surprised at how seriously he was taking the question. Would he go down into hell to save Jaminia? Would he go to protect the oafs who had latched onto him and refused to let go? There was not much for him here in the mortal plane. The dwarves still treated him with indifference, if not outright disdain. Much to Rain's disappointment, he mused. And the only companions he truly had would be going down into a world of evil, treachery, and danger. "You could always stay and be Papa Owen," the snarky voice of Oli Damara rang in his head, and mentally he punched the voice away. He acknowledged how attached Rain seemed to be to him, for reasons completely unclear to Owen himself. But he knew he'd never even suggest taking Rain in. A small twinge in his chest at the thought made him quickly divert his mind back to the main question. Would he go to save Jaminia? "I believe I shall," Owen said slowly, and he could almost hear Amber smiling beside him. "I will need to spend some time in meditation with Oli Damara, mind you, but I shall go." "I'm glad," she said happily, "because I think we'd die without you." "You say that so lightly." "Because it's true. We need you," she affirmed, though he could detect a quiver of fear in her voice. He knew she didn't really care to think about dying, and that his dreams probably had something to do with it. So it was nice of her to acknowledge that he played such an important role in her mind. The smallest part of himself had to admit that it was nice to hear that he was needed, but he quickly punched that part out of his mind as well. Amber squatted down onto the balls of her feet, stretched her arms on the balcony railing, and groaned. "How do you always stay so calm, Owen? I feel so restless and useless, and I feel like I need to do something right now." Owen's eyebrow raised, still not looking at her, and commented, "What do you feel you need to do?" "Punch something? Fly away? I don't know. Just something," Amber replied, growling. Owen nodded. "Hold on to that. It may serve us well in hell. For now, we wait to see what Jalaram and Faethurin come up with. After all, he can work the courts and she can get us to Bator. But what do we do in the meantime? She asked, not happy with the idea of waiting for Jalaram and Faye to spin their wheels. Owen cleared his throat. I am surprised you do not see it, he said bluntly. I see a kingdom in need of repair, citizens in need of help, and a government in need of leaders. I am sure you will find something to do. Amber straightened, paused for a moment, and then gave him the quickest of hugs. Owen scowled, but she released him before he could say anything and began to head for his door. Thank you, Owen. This helped, she said. She reached for the doorknob, but it was stuck. She forcefully tried to jiggle it and yanked with all her might, causing the corner of the door to whack her in the face. Amber rubbed her nose and called back to him. I knew it was coming! Owen rubbed his face wearily as she closed the door to his, Jaminya's room. He refused to see it as his. He would set out for his meditation in the morning after making sure to bid his farewells, so the room would remain as Jaminya left it if he could help it. He considered for a moment leaving before saying goodbye, but he knew that upon reunion, Amber, Faithurin, Ivan, and Rain would never let him hear the end of it, even more so if his absence caused the child to cry. Better to save myself the bigger problem later, he reasoned, as he trudged back to the small, comfortable bed. He felt much more relaxed as he laid down this time than he had before. Speaking with Amber had been a comfort to him as well, and he found himself drift easily into sleep. Not that he'd ever tell her so.
Innocence is a luxury ill afforded in our time. It has been so long absent, so long forgotten, that only newborn babes know what it means anymore. Our once noble kingdom of Directian has been besieged by threats, both external and internal, to the point where friend is just a simple term for one you hope won't stab you in the back. At least, in my circles, that is how it appears to be. But I chose this life. I chose it to spare others from having to live the life I led. I remember when children could play and be carefree, when the only concerns on a woman's mind was the day's laundry and what to cook for dinner. I remember when all a man had to do was be good at his trade and love his family. That's gone now. War has taken its place, and I have the power to stop it, if I play my cards right. My name is not known, but what I have done, perhaps. My face can change, but my mission never does. Peace, by any means necessary, as dreamed of by the heroes of Jaminya, and my queen Jaminya Malum herself, is my goal. No matter how many trusts I have to break, or lives I have to take. Such is the nature of the dirty work of war. I am Rhyme Bowerstone, and they never see me coming.